Welcome to YouTube's Scale Modeling channel. In part 3 of our continuing series on building the HK 148 scale B-17F and G versions, we're going to focus our attention on super detailing the cockpit, the navigational station, as well as a bombardier station using the Eduard colored placards. So let's get started.
I've got the forward interior pieces taped together and the fuselage, of course, closed up. You need this bulkhead, and the flooring for the cockpit to be taped in place so that you can properly position this forward flooring for the bombardier and the navigator. And when you do that, you'll notice that the flooring is skewed just a little bit to this side, enough to where it's noticeable. But what you can do is go ahead and push down on this side like that, and that straightens it out. Let me see if I can get a little closer here. Just like that. So if you get some slow set super glue and put it in there, which is what I'm going to do, and just push down on this side, just like that, and just hold it till it sets, that'll fix that problem. So that's what I'm going to do, and then I'll be able to pull everything apart and then finish gluing the deck and securing it in place to this side of the fuselage. So let's go ahead and do that. I've got the starboard side of their fuselage removed so you can see how I did the taping here to make it very strong and stable. And so I've got a little bit of glue up here, and then I put a little bit of glue, medium set glue, right here. So now what I'm going to do is put a little bit of medium set glue along these rib lines where they touch the deck, make it a little bit stronger in the back end, and then I can go ahead and pull all this off, and then go ahead and get it from the underside with some thick gel super glue and just let it set. So what I want to do is make this nice and strong. So looking good so far. So let me go ahead and do that gluing, and then after it dries, we'll go ahead and pull it apart and see how it looks. I've got the forward fuselage floor secured really well. I put some super glue on the underside here, all along here, and then tiny drops where the framing was. And then when that was dry, I added some 30,000, actually 40,000s, tiny bits of 40,000s back here to really make it strong. So now it's nice and strong. So I think we're in pretty good shape here. The other thing I did, and I mentioned this earlier in a video, I added a 20,000 strip here and a 30,000 strip here on both sides of the fuselage. And here's the other side of the fuselage. Did the same thing. And again, the reason is because the plastic is pretty thin up here. It gets thicker here, but it's pretty thin here. And I wanted some more depth to work with in case I had to do some extra sanding here. But I think we're going to be in pretty good shape. So we are almost ready to start airbrushing. I've got one of the cockpit seats glued up, and the fit is pretty good. So how I did this, and I had to make one slight modification to get a better fit on this back piece on the port side or right side of the cockpit, and I'll show you that. So this piece I glued on first, and to do that I positioned it and used the Tamiya extra thin cement and just kind of hit it on the ends here, and that held it in place. And then I backed it up with tiny drops of super glue. Now on the back side there's a little tab here. Now on the starboard side, if this frame fits well on the tab, but on the port side it did not, and I had to cut this tab off and flatten out the surface to get this back piece to sit correctly right there. And there's a little bit of there's a gap here, and I filled it with some super glue. Had to use 2 applications, and then I sanded it smooth. But on this one, you don't have to cut that little piece out. It fits nice and tight in here. So all I got to do is, again, I'll hit it with, do it right now. I'll hit it with some glue. Right there, just a little bit, and after it dries, then I'll go ahead and hit it again with some super glue to fill that seam, and I'll put a drop of super glue on this over here because it'll flow better, and get into that tiny frame attachment point and that tiny frame attachment point. Now, I'll let that dry for a second. The positioning holes for the frames, I had to drill them out a little bit using a .039 bit from my trusty drill bit set. I've had this drill bit set for about 30 years, and I bought it from Micromart, but they work really, really well. So .039, and so now this one fits much better, much better. Now the other thing, when you position the seat, if you position the seat with the bottom, see how that's I got it angled a little bit? If you don't do this, the seat's going to sit like this. So you don't want that. You want the seat to sit like that, straight. And how I did that was I put a drop of Tester's glue on the backing right about here where it touches the armor plating of the seat, right about here. And then that allowed me a little bit of adjustment time to play with the positioning of it so that it would sit straight. So those are the my comments on the construction of the seats. And they go together fairly well. You see that gap, you're going to have to fill that a little bit. Although you're not really going to see it very much, but you really need to go ahead and fill that gap with some super glue, and then sand it smooth, some medium set super glue, this stuff right here. And you apply it with, puddle on a piece of paper, and then use this thin wire applicator. We can get in there right there. So we'll go ahead and do that. Move this out of the way. And then, now the other thing is I always clean the cap of the super glue, because you don't want to build up a super glue on the tip here. Over time it's going to happen. But if you do this, this glue will last twice as long. So let's go ahead and do this area here first. There we go. Get a little bit more in there. All right, and then we'll put a little drop there and put a little drop there, nice and strong, and you're not going to really see any of that all those drops of glue once it's painted, but you are going to see this. So we need to go ahead and fill that. Yeah, my hands are shaking. I've had way too much coffee today. And because of the capillary action of this stuff, it's seeping down inside the opening. Okay, we got it. So now I just got to let that dry, and I'll probably have to do one more application, and then I can go ahead and use this sanding stick and sand it smooth. So let me push that on the side there while that's drying. Close that. The other thing I do is I'll clean this tip and then get rid of that remaining glue. My comments on the bulkhead here, you can see these 3 mold punch outs. Okay, they need to be sanded out because you're going to see it with the console in place, which is right here. And when you put this in here, see if I can get it in place. See, you're going to see those mold punch outs. So what you need to do is sand them out. And the way I did that was careful sanding with this tip. And of course it doesn't take much to get rid of the granulations on the surface of these sanding sticks, so you have to keep cutting it down. But yeah, that got rid of those mold punch outs. And once I start working on the console and all the interior colored placard detail set from the Eduard detail set, I'll show you how that looks and how I do it. I'm going to do it similar to the way I do all my others. For the box shapes, I'll back them up with some plastic strip on the backside so that it adds strength, and I can use tester's glue to glue everything together. These oxygen tanks, I'm going to show you how to paint these. They need to be yellow, and I'll use airbrushing, and I'll carefully mask around these after I do the background. These yellows will be the last thing I'll do, and then once that's done, I'll mask over all the yellow and then paint this. So this one will be a little bit easier to do, but yeah, it's coming along. So far I'm pleased. I had done a pretty extensive tape on this tape up on this kit, so I know what to expect and what the challenges are with the seams. And the steering yokes, they go together really, really nice. And they had a little tiny bit of mold seam lines right along here, and you can scrape that off with the tip of a sharp number 11 X-Acto blade. Just hold it at about a 45-degree angle and do this. and it comes off. So yeah, we're making progress. I'm working slow, and again, I'm going to scratch build throttle quadrants, and the mixture throttles go here, and we'll see how it all comes together. It's got some nice grooves in here, so probably 10 thousandths will fit in there, and yeah, it'll look good. So I'll show you how I scratch build that. I forgot to mention these black lines. They are for the outlines for where the bulkhead sides, this one and one on the other side, and then the front bulkhead, it's got some black lines on it, and that's where the part sits. And so what I'll do is I'll just run a thin strip of masking tape along here and some here on both sides, and then I'll go ahead and paint everything, and then when I'm ready to glue it together, I just pull the tape up. That alleviates having to do a lot of scraping, and when I've done that in the past, you really got to be careful how you scrape so you don't remove paint in areas where you don't want paint to be removed. So that's what the black lines are for. Now, I forgot to mention also the backside of the yolks, control yolks, had mold punch outs. 40 thousandths strip plastic or rod fits in there really, really well. So I dipped the tip in some super glue and stuck it right in place, and when it's dry, we'll just cut it off and sand it smooth, and that'll fix that problem. And yes, you're gonna see that because the stroll, they sit pretty prominently here, and you're gonna be able to look through the windscreen and the cockpit glass and see those holes. So yeah, you got to fill them, and that's how you do it. As I mentioned, I had to cock this seat a little bit this way in order to get it to sit straight, so that when you install it, make sure I get this set right. When you install it, it looks straight. On this one, when I tested it, this cup fit correctly inside here, and it's nice and straight. So we'll go ahead and put a dab of tester's glue on the back here and set it in place. I always do it this way. So that's all you need. And we'll go ahead and set it in place. So looks pretty good. And then once it's dry, I'll go ahead and hit it with some super glue on the bottom. But let's see if we can get this installed without moving the seat. See how it looks. Okay. Yeah, looks pretty straight. So I'll just set this here, let it dry, and we'll go ahead and excuse me, clean the tip, get rid of this glue, and I'll double check this tip. Make sure it's clean. If you do this, this glue will last a while, but once it starts getting tacky, it'll need to be replaced with a new tube. Okay, and I have let me put this out of the way here and show you the stand that I made that keeps the glue holding straight up. So if you lay it down all the time, the glue tends to come out through the top and clog the top. So this works really, really well. I've had this for years, and works great. So as again to go back over this, these seats are done, and I just need to put a little bit of super glue down there, and they'll be ready for painting and mild weathering. So, and we'll start on the placards pretty soon from Eduard's pre-painted placards. That'll really dress up the interior. I have all of the Eduard cockpit details completed, and the other thing I've done is wherever one of these placards is going, I put a little piece of tape so that I can use tester's glue. And as I've explained to you in my B-17 build and my monogram B-24 build, I always put a backing of plastic on here, one, to make it stronger, and two, it allows me to use tester's glue in order to position these parts. So even on these small ones, and even on the oxygen regulator, this little round disc right here, which I did with my Waldron punch tool, it's got a little plastic backing. So now, with all of these parts, I can use tester's glue to install them, and that gives me some working time for positioning. If you were to just use the placards, if you don't set it up right correctly the first time, it goes on crooked. So this allows me to do that. And even this tiny piece, let me see if I can grab this and show you, it has a little piece of plastic on the inside for using tester's glue. Now, the challenge you have with this console, which is beautifully done, is if you lay it flat, these throttle arms, they're going to kind of flop to the left and right because there's no depth to this. So here's what I did. I glued some 15 thousandths to the flat surfaces on the top and the bottom. And what that did was it created a little bit of depth for the levers to fit right in here. And I'll use a little bit of white glue so that, which is really sticky, and they'll go here. There's levers that go here. The problem is you're really not going to see them. They're so tiny. But these throttle levers stand out. So here are the throttle levers, and I used a chopper to make the throttle levers with 30 thousandths styrene rod, and they came out pretty good. And of course they're super glued on here. So I'm now ready to go ahead and reorganize these in my box, which let me show you. And I showed you this on my B-24 build. Everything is labeled so I know where all these tiny parts go. So I'm ready to move on to the navigator and bombardier area, and I'll show you what all that looks like when it's done. And this is going to look really nice because you're going to be able to see through the cockpit glass as well as through the top to look at all of this stuff. So yeah, we're making progress here. So these parts are ready for priming and painting. I've completed all of the placards for the bombardier and navigational area. And again, these will really enhance the interior appearance. Although you're not going to see a lot of this because it's such a small space, but I wanted to show you all of them anyway. And again, I try to mark them so that I know where everything goes. And I got tiny pieces of masking tape where these parts will be glued to with tester's glue because all the backings have plastic on them. So they'll, even this piece, this rack for ammo pouches, is now all set up. So And, you know, some of these pieces are rather large. And again, they all have backings on them. So on the interior of the fuselage, where parts get put on, I've got little strips of masking tape so that I don't have to scrape it off later. And of course I've got all of the gluing surfaces masked over, so this will make it a lot easier. Once I've got the interior done, I can go ahead and pull the tape off and go from there. And here's the other side of the fuselage. Same thing, little bits of masking tape. And I put tape over the openings where the windows are so that the spray doesn't get through here and get onto the other side. Sometimes it can mar the surface. So there you have it. So the fuselage halves are all ready for airbrushing. And once I'm done, I can start, after I detail paint this, I can start applying all of these small placards. So yeah, I think we're there. And this stuff will really enhance the interior appearance of the forward part of the fuselage, along with the enhancements I made to the cockpit.
I use this picture as a thumbnail, but I did want to show you what the interior looks like once all the Eduard cockpit placards are glued into place. It really enhances the appearance of the model. So, with that said, have a great evening, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up, and stay tuned for part 4. And, as always, happy scale modeling!